All right, today, guys, cardio, or the holy grail of what the fuck do we do, right? I'm gonna break this down. This isn't theory, so much so that I actually have literally charted it out for what we literally get, and I'll define that here in a minute, because the state of mathematics in this world, the complex mathematics and physiology and all this sort of stuff, when you're dealing with running or swimming or very high cardiovascular bouts of fitness, after 100 years of trying to do this and compete and beat it and constantly shave seconds down, we don't have to guess at all. What we do is have to understand that there's some principles within it that we need to work within, we need to accept, we need to understand. It's not that complex. It just, most information that you're fed is coming from a place of theory where people themselves have never ever done it. Even if they've coached it, but they can't quite place their finger on, well, this will work because we did one thing and one thing beginning of all is we've got to do an assessment. That's the big thing, the big takeaway on this we're going to start with is, what does cardio mean? The origin of cardio is heart, cardiovascular. Cardio, the heart and the vascular system associated to it, and how that impacts what? We hear cardio, it's running. No. Cardiovascular, improvement, having a good cardiovascular system is in which a person can exert themselves at very submaximal, running, swimming. It's not lifting weights, right? It's very submaximal from a standpoint of mass being moved over a distance for a very given distance or a very given time. We've chosen, or like in some cases in selection, we're like, well, you don't know what this distance is, but we know we have to keep a pace. And so we always are working off a pace, we're working off a distance, right? We're working off a time or some sort of conglomeration of that being a tempo, okay? And so knowing that cardio means heart, we can do very different bouts of cardio because sometimes running too much from a muscle skeletal standpoint can really hurt. And so what does that mean? Are you doing cardio wrong? No, typically that just means that you get to a point where your nervous system is saying, hey, we've kind of reached the limit because your heart and lungs and your vascular system, your veins, your arteries, your capillaries doing a great job. But your bones, your tendons and ligaments, they don't heal as fast as our cardiovascular system, especially under a good diet, a good recovery, but things, because they don't always just overlap. Because if just doing more of something, whether it's more push-ups, more running, more lifting weights, yielded the results, we would just go do more of it, right? And that is where a lot of people get confused and run into some issues. So knowing cardio, I can access it. It's not exclusive to running or arbitrary program distances and volumes. What does that mean? Like I said, cardio can be running, it can be rucking, it can be swimming, it can be a combination of all those. It can be doing an arm bike, and we're going to get to a few other things that we can really go wait, that's cardio? Yeah, I joke around, but I don't. You can do bicep cardio. How do I know that? Let me grab this here real quick. Oh, I'm getting all tangled up here. Get it off the wall. Pulse oximeters, right? We have heart rate monitors and all these sort of things. This is real time, absolute cardiovascular readings for what is going on every single heartbeat. It's not an average, and it tells you your oxygen saturation for your cardio. So we can in very real time get feedback and see how you are actively working within this bout of cardio. Do I throttle up? Do I throttle back? If I throttle up, what's the value? If I throttle back, do I lose value? And those are all the sort of things that we teach and go through with the class here and teach this in real time. We do it in the weight room. We do it on the runs. We do it in the swims. Okay. You can also use your 2 fingers and a watch to count your heart rate, and you get essentially the same thing real time. And when you get acclimated to seeing what your heart is doing in these different various bouts of cardio, or you're at Bud's and I'm standing in line waiting to do my pull-ups, and it's the first couple weeks, and I'm stressed out, my heart's going. And I'm like, okay, do my 10 pull-ups. And I'm like, oh my God, there's all this chaos and music and fire hoses, and everyone's getting wet standing. And I was like, hey, I got 90 seconds or a minute, 20 seconds before I have to go do pull-ups again. It's like, oh, can I manage in those sort of things, the cardio, my heart, with breath work, right? Real breathing access, okay? So it's not exclusive to running or arbitrary program distance, like just run more. It does not work that way. If you took like 100 people and that's all you ever did was just do more of this, do more of this, would there be a couple people that probably progressed? Yes, but that is very likely because of what their previous stages of cardiovascular development were, not just you're just a bunch of clones of each other, and that's not the case at all, right? Because let's say you had someone that was a cross-country runner at Virginia Tech, and then you had someone that was a shot put thrower from Florida State, and you just had them do the same cardio over and over and over. Like, someone has a real advantage to doing better cardio, okay? So the range, there is a range. Like, what do you mean there's a range, okay? I can do slow and steady, tempo, intervals, high intensity interval training. There is a range of cardio you can do based on what your entry point into, I need to do more cardio. Well, what are you? What's your background? What's your current state of readiness? Because your goal times and distances may vary. Because are we talking a mile and a half? Are we talking a 4 mile? Are we talking 16 miles? Are we talking a marathon, right? Are we talking with or without a rucksack? Are we talking a 5.5 mile ocean swim? Are we talking a 500 meter combat side stroke, right? To achieve and do something better, like I said, I'm going to show you the graph. It's really simple how to plot this, really quite simple. But at this point in the game, there is absolutely no guessing needed in 2025 or beyond. We don't need to guess anymore about what sort of cardio we need to do, how long the cardio should be, what should the tempo be, because there's a couple different ways to skin this cat, depending, like I said, where you as an individual and your current state of readiness is, right? Slow and steady is a really sustained cardio, is a really great place to improve someone's cardiovascular state, unless they're a world-class marathoner. How does a marathoner improve their cardiovascular state? It's not running slow, which comes in, we come into tempos and intervals, and a lot of really, really good, the world-class marathoners, their mile marathon is like a fucking sprint. It's a mile. If they ran a mile, it's fast. It's super fast. You're like, wait a minute. Is a mile really a bout of cardio? If you're running it for 4 minutes, you're like, the textbook's going to say no. The textbook's going to say you don't get into cardiovascular training until you get to a certain minute. Like, oh, wait. That's why we have to put context to this, because the best marathoners in the world are doing high-intensity interval training with weights. They're also doing intervals. They're also doing tempo runs. They are not just doing slow, steady. And like, well, if you're running a marathon, why don't we just run 40 miles? Because, and I'll show you in the chart, you don't challenge yourself by just running longer distance, that in every single case, longer distances will always end up, you have to slow down at some point, right? How do you slow down and get better if you're trying? So it's really super straightforward, okay? So there's a couple different ways, and that's why we include all of these. We want slow, steady cardio in the pool with the ruck and with the run. We want to do tempo runs when people are hitting a plateau and they're like, man, I can run 6 miles and not be out of breath, but my 4 mile time's not coming down. Tempo runs. And there's a limit to tempo runs because those tempo runs are really goal time and distance oriented, right? They're a little bit longer, a little bit harder tempos, but like, okay, what if I'm having like in a mile and a half? Like, shit, I got to get mile and a half time down. I can't do slow, steady cardio all the time because that's not taxing the system, right? Tempo runs might be longer than a mile and a half tempo. So what am I going to do? Sprint intervals. What if your cardiovascular state gets substantially good in the first 400 and 800 meters? That's where the 500 meter combat side stroke just gets people all like, what the heck? Like, it's only 500 meters. Like, how do I get that? Because they have a hard time swimming 100 meters fast. It's like, and I got to maintain that for 500 meters? Yeah, we do that through interval sprints. Yeah, there's different ways to go about that, and you can package it a bunch of different ways. But then also, your CrossFit has a high value depending on what it is. Or we can package not the term CrossFit. High intensity interval training came long before the term CrossFit came around. And this is extremely well researched from extremely high value coaches all over the planet. So high intensity interval training, okay, is a really good place. Like it says, duration and time should be determined by a measured state of readiness. Here's where people go wrong. Like, hey, well, how about I'm just gonna not measure anything, right? Your PST is a measurement. It's a gross measurement. What's your total time? I ran my 1.5 miles in 10.5 minutes. What does that mean? It's like, well, we don't know unless we get splits within the PST. The splits tell us from a standpoint of a graph where we begin to fall off and we start getting maladaptation, okay? And that's why we need to have snapshots within the 500 meter. We need to have snapshots within the 4 mile. We need to have snapshots within the 1.5 mile. Marathoners take splits. Why? Because if you are always hitting a wall at 17 miles, we'll say, then you don't just keep, well, I'm just gonna run more. That does not work. You have to accommodate the point of physiology at the point of degradation. Where am I hitting this wall? So I wanna push that wall further by what? Training with real vigor, intent, not just vigorousness, but intentional vigor that is programmed high intensity interval trainer, interval sprints, tempo runs, and then we do want to do slow and steady, because when the slow and steady comes around, you see that your splits improve within the longer duration slow and steady, okay? So the last thing too is your frequency. Like, how often do I run? How often do I swim? How often do I do rucking? How often do I do cardio? That is determined by a few things, and should be, and that's the problem, is nobody wants to measure anything anymore because they just want to do something longer and slower and think that that's going to work. Just like, oh, I'm just going to do more pull-ups and it'll come along. No, it won't when stress shows up. We're in this nice, comfortable gym. We're running around these nice, safe streets in the United States with our shirt off and trying to get hard and tough. That does not work when stress shows up, okay? So frequency and type should be determined by the goals. Is it a mile, 1.5 miles, 4 miles, 16, whatever it is? That's a goal. Like, what's my goal, or a goal time? I need to run this 1.5 miles in a sub 9. I need to run this 4 miles in a sub 28. Those are determining the frequency, the timeline, and the person's measured state, right? We have to take those metrics to see where because we're not trying to highlight where you fail so we can be like, you fail, you're having a hard time at this distance, how could you be having a hard time? That's ridiculous. We look at those times of failure, those physiological failure, to go, ooh, that gives me insight, and like, okay, you're failing close to the end of that race. We may not want to do certain types of training, like tempo, that is going to elongate the distance. We might going to go, ooh, what if we get better in our first mile? Then we can propagate better miles after that point. So we're going to experiment, or we're going to know right away. That's why we have to measure. I don't want to just experiment when I can just measure to begin with. Okay? And so here's the chart. Here's the graph. Really super straightforward. What you're seeing here are literal chart times that we get. You're going to see goal and you're going to see actuality. For the 1.5 miles, that's what this is it right here. This is distance, 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile, 4 mile. And this is time, 2, 4, 6, 8, all the way to 30 minutes. Okay? So a person's goal time, we'll say, for 1.5 miles, let's say it sits around 8 minutes. These are the times you gotta shoot these splits every 400 meters. Boom. Every 400 meters, we're going to hit these splits, and that's what we're going to work towards. But what we actually see is someone comes out too fast, right? And they end up around 14 minutes. That's what we end up getting. And so, okay, well, what do we do? Well, we don't just run more distance, because if we run more distance, we're not actually attacking or focusing on the area that we're having trouble with. This is what we're having trouble with. This right here doesn't, because if we just keep persisting, this is going to happen. Boom, we hit a wall, boy. And like 34 minutes, you've only gotten to less than 3 miles. That's what we get. And so by running further at a slow pace does not improve our cardiovascular. And we see this too. So we have a red line, which is our goal. So we have a 4 mile to 28 minutes. This is your goal pacing. But most people, what we see is the green. We see them come out slow, 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 right? They usually at 30 minutes, they're about 3 miles. And so, well, wait a minute, I'm just going to run further. No, 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 no. If we run further, this is what happens. We just keep getting slower. And so we know that just running more distance, adding more distance of a slower pace, in no way, shape, or form focuses on what? Right? This right here. So if the green and the red are the same goal race, right? XY axis. This box right here of green is the problem area. We've got to bring this box of green down to the red. And this box of green doesn't come down to the red when we just continue running slower and slower and further and further. It does not work. Just adding, it's such a scam. It's if anybody is just saying run more distance and you'll get faster, it goes against every bit of knowledge that's been gained over the last 100 years in cardiovascular development. It never, and so what the other side too is like, well, let's say you're running 20, 50, 80 miles or whatever it is above. All you've done is wear yourself out so much that you've actually conditioned yourself that when you show up to buds, like, boom, stress, you will always 100% of the time perform to this lesser ability because you've never worked within those real paces. Like, okay, how do I do this? This is where tempo runs come in. Because we know at tempos, we got to get some distances out there. We got to break it up, create rest periods, run as hard as we can, throttle back, get our breath, run as hard as we can. We start accumulating distances at a very high rate of potentiality or effort that is accommodating or creating this higher stress that your body has to condition or adapt to. Because it is not hard to run further and further and further and further. What's really, really hard is to know in 4 miles, I got to keep getting faster and faster and faster and faster. And then 1.5 miles, I just got to get faster and faster and faster. And all the while, I got to do calisthenics. I got to deal with sleep deprivation. I got to do with all these things. Marathoners, ultra marathoners do not do good in those tempo world of selection. Run 4 miles as fast as you can on an empty stomach. Go to chow, you're stressed out, you can't eat. You come back, you're at the obstacle course. Fuck, I'm tired. I'm doing interval training. It's called obstacle course, it's interval training, right? Buds is interval, stop, go, hurry up, stop, go, hurry up, do it fast, stop, go. And occasionally, second phase, they throw in a 14 miler, a 12 miler. Occasionally in first phase, they have you run a 6 or 8. And it's not to improve your cardiovascular state, it's to deselect you. That's the point. Okay. So very, very simple, straightforward math. And this is how track athletes, coaches, chart their athletes. What's your distance? What's your time? Time, distance. Where on this time distance sort of chart you're coming out good and you're like, boom, you hit a wall. Because we want this nice straight line that goes on forever and ever and ever. But eventually it won't. Eventually we know that there's a limit because of our glycogen, our oxidative, our state of tendon and ligament health, all these sort of things. So if you're really, really, really interested in doing cardio correctly, that always promotes better this and better that. And the thing with cardio, what happens is when you have a really good cardiovascular system, your muscles grow. When you have a really good cardiovascular system, you recover fast. So at no point are we saying you shouldn't do cardio. We're saying the cardio that you should do is measured, it's metered, it's goal-oriented, and you are in the process evaluating in a state of readiness so you can make shifts to other types of cardiovascular training when one seems to find a limitation based on whatever it is. But all we ever have to do is look at your heart, cardio. Look at your oxygen, your breath rate, and how you're breathing and how much oxygen you're taking in during cardio. And that is why we use pulse oximeters. All right, folks, hopefully that was helpful. But again, we don't guess, ever guess, because we don't need to, because there's ballistic physics in sniper school that's far more complex than this 6th grade algebra.